कौम दे सूरियां दे सिर किसे अगे झुकने नहीं। हुण कौम दे सूरियां दे सिर किसे अगे झुकने नहीं।
जो बाबा साहब चलाए काफले रुकने नहीं।
हुण कौम दे सूरियां दे सिर किसे अगे झुकने नहीं।
जो बाबा साहब चलाए काफले रुकने नहीं।
हुण ये काफले रुकने नहीं।
हुण ये काफले रुकने नहीं।
हुण ये काफले रुकने नहीं। कदे ये काफले रुकने नहीं। नाल पहाड़ां जेड़े मत्था लाउंदे ने, पन्नियां ते इतिहास ओही लिखवाउंदे ने। नाल पहाड़ां जेड़े मत्था
लाउंदे ने,
पन्नियां ते इतिहास ओही
लिखवाउंदे ने।
अग दे जो अंगियारे, अग दे जो अंगियारे बुक्कल विच लुकणे नहीं।
जो बाबा साहब चलाए काफले रुकने नहीं।
हुण कौम दे सूरियां दे सिर किसे अगे झुकने नहीं।
जो बाबा साहब चलाए काफले रुकने नहीं।
हुण ये काफले रुकने नहीं।
हुण ये काफले रुकने नहीं।
हुण ये काफले रुकने नहीं। कदे ये काफले रुकने नहीं। भावना दिल दे विचों कट दियो, रल करू बगावत अणखी झंडे गट दियो। हुण हीन भावना
दिल दे विचों कट दियो,
रल करू बगावत
अणखी झंडे गट दियो।
खिच्चे बिन निशाने, खिच्चे बिन निशाने कदे भी उकणे नहीं।
जो बाबा साहब चलाए काफले रुकने नहीं।
हुण कौम दे सूरियां दे सिर किसे अगे झुकने नहीं।
जो बाबा साहब चलाए काफले रुकने नहीं।
हुण ये काफले रुकने नहीं।
हुण ये काफले रुकने नहीं।
हुण ये काफले रुकने नहीं।
हॉल छोटा पड़ रहा है, मैं उत्साह समझ सकता हूँ, और जहाँ जगह मिले कृपया अपनी जगह ले लें। जैसा कि आप सब जानते हैं, बाबा साहेब भीमराव अंबेडकर की 123वीं जयंती मनाने के लिए हम सब यहाँ एकत्र हुए हैं। आप सबको इस अवसर की खास शुभकामनाएं, ढेरों शुभकामनाएं। धन्यवाद। मैं ये कार्यक्रम का फॉर्मेट बता देना चाहूँगा। पहले सबसे पहले अभी ये फ्लोर खुलेगा, बाबा साहब को जो भी श्रद्धा सुमन अर्पित करना चाहें वो कर सकते हैं। उसके बाद महामहिम उच्चायुक्त महोदय माल्यार्पण करेंगे प्रतिमा का। उसके बाद कुछ अन्य गणमान्य व्यक्तियों द्वारा माल्यार्पण किया जाएगा, श्रद्धा सुमन अर्पित किए जाएंगे, और फिर एक बुद्धिस्ट प्रेयर जो कि एक मॉन्क है वो करेंगे, और उसके बाद कुछ स्टूडेंट्स भीम स्तुति गाएंगे, आप देख सकते हैं। उसके बाद कुछ ब्रीफ स्पीचेज होंगे हाई कमिश्नर के, और कुछ जो भी जिन्होंने भी बाबा साहब के संदेश को पूरी दुनिया में फैलाया है, आगे बढ़ाया है, जो उनके अनुयायी हैं, उनके वक्तव्य होंगे। उसके बाद समापन है, डिनर है। धन्यवाद। अब जो भी चाहें बाबा साहब की प्रतिमा के समक्ष श्रद्धा सुमन अर्पित कर सकते हैं। और फोटो
प्लीज सारी की सारी दिखा, सारी की सारी दिखा प्लीज। आप
अब मैं उपायुक्त महोदय से अनुरोध करता हूँ कि बाबा साहब को श्रद्धासुमन अर्पित करें।
एक मिनट साहब उसको इधर ले इधर
मैं लॉर्ड हमीद साहब से अनुरोध करता हूँ संतोष दास जी, पार्किंग और डेगनम के मेयर श्री हरदयाल सिंह राय जी, एंट्री के मेयर चौधरी अम्बेडकर, योगराज अहिर साहब, डिप्टी मेयर ऑफ साउथ सुनील चोपड़ा जी, के डिप्टी मेयर जय प्रकाश, नाम भूल रहा हूँ, गौतम जी आप जरा उनका हेल्प करें।
काउंसिलर जगदीश शर्मा रिप्रेजेंटिंग लंदन बारो ऑफ हंसलो।
काउंसिलर जगदीश शर्मा जी,
Madam Chaudhary from London Borough of Harrow.
काउंसिलर चौधरी रिप्रेजेंटिंग लंदन बारो ऑफ हैरो।
काउंसिलर चौधरी साहब,
सब आ गए ठीक है। Okay, that's it.
जो श्री सुनील करिया करावाना जी द्वारा किया जाएगा।
हम लोग साथ में डिसाइड करेंगे। डॉक्टर सुनील जो ब्रिटिश आर्म फोर्सेस के चैपलिन पहनने वाले थे वो नहीं पहुंच पाए हैं, तो हम लोग लीड करते हैं। भिक्खू भी आने वाले थे, वो भी किसी वजह से नहीं आ पाए, तो हम लोग साथ में लीड करते हैं। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स
नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि
धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि संघं शरणं गच्छामि द्वितीयंपि बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि
द्वितीयंपि धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि द्वितीयंपि संघं शरणं गच्छामि तृतीयंपि बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि तृतीयंपि धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि तृतीयंपि संघं शरणं गच्छामि पाणिपाता वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादयामि अग्निनादाना वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादयामि कामेषु मिथ्याचारा वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादयामि मुसावादा वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादयामि सुरामेरयमद्धाना वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादयामि भीम स्मरण भीम स्तुति
सकल विद्यं विदुरयानं देवरूपं सुजीव निर्मल चक्षु गभीरभोसं गौरवर्णं सुखाय अभयचित्तं निर्भयकामं सुरतदम्मं सुप्रेम विरतरज्जं सुजननेनं भीमरावं सरामि भीमरावं सरामि भीमरावं सरामि दिव्य प्रभरत्नतु साधु वरदानतु आद्य कुलभूषतु भीमराजा सकल विद्यापति ज्ञान सतसंगति शास्त्र शासनमति बुद्धि तेजा पंकजानरवरा रत्न स्वजन उद्धरा भगवंता मुचाखरा भक्त काजा चवदार संगरी शस्त्र धरिता करी कापला हरियुरी रौद्र रूपा मुक्ती पथ कोणता जीर्ण स्मृती जाळिता उजाळिला अगतिका मार्ग साजा राष्ट्र घटनाकृती शोभते भारती महामानव बोलती सात संज्ञा शरण बुद्धासमी शरण धम्मासमी शरण संघासमी भीमराजा 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 जय भीम
Lord Khalid Hamid, Deputy High Commissioner, Dr. Corinne Linaus, Lecturer, Institute of Commonwealth Studies, Mr. Santosh Das, President of FABO, Shri Yogarani Heath, President of Shri Guru Ravidas Sabha, Professor Kelvin Brown of Indiana University, Mayor of Hounslow, Mayor of Enfield, Mayor of Barking and Dagenham, Deputy Mayor of Ealing, Deputy Mayor of Southwark, Shri Gautam Chakravarti, Senior Leader of FABO. Ladies and gentlemen, very good evening to all of you. I welcome all of you at India House today. We have gathered here to commemorate the 123rd birth anniversary of Bharat Ratna, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, the founder of the Constitution of India and champion of social justice. We celebrate this day every year at India House in close collaboration with Prabhu and Shri Guru Ravidas Sabha Sautha. This is a solemn function, and you will hear from the prominent speakers their perspective about the great leader of the world whose ideology is relevant across the borders. I once again welcome all the distinguished guests, community leaders, and office bearers of various organizations. Now I would request the High Commissioner to benefit us with his remark.
Lord Khalid Hamid, eminent professors, mayors, members of the Indian community, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and privilege for me to welcome all of you today as we celebrate the 123rd birth anniversary of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, one of India's greatest sons, one a towering personality in our history, and one who indeed, as Minister Coordination remarked, is a figure in world history. It is wonderful for me to come back. I was present at a similar tribute to the late Dr. Ambedkar 9 years ago, and to see how much the message of the need to remember Dr. Ambedkar has spread and how well attended this function is. I apologize to the members of the community who are in the gallery above me that we do not have adequate space in this hall. We would in fact have to think in terms of a larger venue if such enthusiastic response is received. But let me just say that over the years, the April 14th has come to be commemorated in memory of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar with the name Ambedkar Jayanti, not only in India but all over the world. This day, of course, as we all know, recalls the birth anniversary of Dr. Ambedkar, who was born on this day in the year 1891. Born into difficult circumstances, but it is an occasion to recollect the vision and genius of one who grew well beyond those circumstances to become one of the chief architects of the Indian Constitution. But it wasn't just his role as an architect of the Constitution, but the very many roles played by Dr. Ambedkar, which has left an everlasting inspiration on the social and political fabric of our great nation. Above all, we remember that Dr. Ambedkar gave our nation a profound social content and a challenging social democratic vision. You will be hearing from the other distinguished speakers in much greater detail, but let me just say that for us in the High Commission, it is a particular privilege to have this opportunity. I'm happy that it has become a tradition for an annual observance of Ambedkar Jayanti in the High Commission. And it is a matter of pride for us that this hall is in fact named the Ambedkar Hall, and we ensure proper respect to this great leader. Dr. Ambedkar has sometimes been described as a messiah of the disadvantaged in India. But I don't think he would have liked to be called a messiah. He was not carrying a message for the life hereafter. His was a message to change the ways of the life here and now. In fact, he embodied what another great political revolutionary described as the task of political philosophy is not to understand the world. The task of political philosophy is to change the world. And he began as an opponent of injustice, discrimination and oppression, which marked society of his time and gave us a completely new situation which we live in today. He worked hard to bring about a world of equality, irrespective of gender, caste, color or creed. He was a luminary, a guiding star in the global fight against social injustice. His unstinting efforts in this regard put him in the league of other world leaders who you might say embodied in one own's body the concept of an ideal whose time has come. Think of Mahatma Gandhi, think of Martin Luther King, think of Nelson Mandela, people embodied this vision. And few nations are blessed to have had in such a short span of time such a galaxy of great men as India had in that 20th century. And we must in this century rise to his expectations and build a humane and great nation. We, of course, have particular happiness in recalling Dr. Ambedkar at this time when we in India are having the national general elections, that great exercise in democracy. And it was the unique features of the Indian constitution that it immediately gave full franchise to every single citizen of the country. That is why today you have a potential electorate of 800 million people participating in the elections. But democracy is not only about elections, and the manner in which we allow our legislative institutions to function will shape people's perceptions about them. These institutions of democracy have to be nurtured and protected so that we can safeguard its future. In his last speech to the Constituent Assembly, Ambedkar ji said, unconstitutional methods were the grammar of anarchy. He stressed the importance of resorting to constitutional methods for the redressal of all grievances. The cultivation of constitutional morality among people is indispensable for the successful operation of democracy, to quote him in his own words. We owe it to our posterity to conduct ourselves in a manner that is worthy of our people, our freedom fighters, our constitution, and our great republic. So when I garlanded the statue of Ambedkar ji, my thoughts, and I would like to share them with you, are that it is time to remember his sacrifice and the statesmanship and sincerity of other leaders with whom he worked, like Gandhiji. Today, over 6 decades after its adoption, our Constitution has become the uniting spirit of our country, guiding us through challenging times and unprecedented national, social and political change. For us abroad, his words from decades ago are perhaps even more relevant today. And for those who are living abroad, he said, I do not want that our loyalty as Indians should be in the slightest way affected by any competitive loyalty, whether that loyalty arises out of our religion, out of our culture, or out of our language. I want all people to be Indian first, Indian last, and nothing else but Indians. Do remember that his brilliant intellectual contributions spanned not just work on the Indian Constitution, but everything to do with India. In Columbia University, he wrote on provincial governance. At the LSE, he wrote The Problem of the Rupee, a book about the problem of the rupee in 1923. This is long before anyone even thought that the rupee would become an international issue. And later, of course, we remember his foray into the great issue of the freedom struggle, and later wrote the book on Pakistan, the problem of Pakistan. His final works on Buddhism will rank him as a social philosopher and a religious philosopher of the first rank. But we must unite now in ensuring that our Constitution continues its evolving process, coming closer to that vision of Dr. Ambedkar, and remember, in that Constitution, the chapter called the directive principles of state policy. And it is in adopting new rights and instruments to bring about social equality, particularly for the deprived and disadvantaged sections of society, that we can really pay tribute to the memory of Ambedkar. In his own words, the Constitution can provide only the organs of state, such as the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The factors on which the working of the organs of state depends are the people and the political parties they will set up as their instruments to carry out their wishes and their policies. I recall one of our former prime ministers, while as foreign minister of India, had travelled to another country, which had just gone through a great revolution. And he met the revolutionary leaders, I won't name the country, as a matter of diplomacy. And they were seated there, and one of them was trying to preach to foreign minister of India, saying, you know, we had a revolution in our country, you didn't have a revolution, that is why there is so many problems. And so the foreign minister replied, in all humility, may I tell you, sir, that what was started by the Indian Constitution is a revolution that takes place every single day, in every village, in every town, in every town. I would like to therefore conclude to say that it is our duty as Indians and as well-meaning people to take forward the work of the Indian Constitution as one of the most powerful instruments of peaceful social change in the world. With almost 1/6 of humanity in our own country, the trajectory of India will probably influence the trajectory of every human being in the world. And I'm delighted that we have all the distinguished panelists and the very eminent academics who have spent so much time on studying the works and the life of Ambedkar Ji, one from this country, one from the United States, and so many councillors and others who are active in the field of politics who have joined all of us in paying tribute to this wonderful son of India. Thank you, Jai Hind.
धन्यवाद उच्चायुक्त महोदय। अब बीज व्याख्यान का समय है, जिसे लोग की नोट एड्रेस कहते हैं। तो मैं खालिद हमीद साहब से अनुरोध करता हूँ कि संबोधित करें सभा को।
Thank you.
Respected High Commissioner, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Ambedkar, Bhimrao Ramji, 1891 to 1956, was born in Central India on 14th April 1891. The youngest of 14 children of Ramji, Maloji, Sakpal, a Subedar Major in the British Indian Army and headmaster of a military school. His family were untouchables, belonging to the community of Mahars, who, though of lowly caste, were reputed to be a spirited people from whom the Bombay Army had obtained new recruits. The indignities, humiliations, and hardships to which he was subjected stirred in him, in this proud, intelligent, and sensitive boy, a bitter resentment which lingered with him to the very end. In 1900, he enrolled in a government school with the surname of Ambedkar. He next attended Elphinstone's College with financial help from the Maharaja of Baroda. In 1906, he married Ramabai, daughter of a rail reporter. Of 4 sons and 1 daughter born to them, only 1 son was to survive. In 1912, he went to Columbia University in the USA for a PhD in economics. On his return to India, he entered the service of Baroda State as a junior administrative officer. As an untouchable, he found himself treated with contempt by clerks and even office boys. Unable to obtain even personal accommodation and even sometimes denied food, he left Baroda State and managed to get a job as lecturer in political economy at Sydenham College in Bombay. 2 years later, he returned to the UK, where he was called to the bar in 1923 and also obtained a DSc from London University. He then returned to India and started a legal practice in Bombay in 1923. He soon began to organize the untouchables to make them socially and politically conscious with the motto, educate, agitate, organize, and led to Satyagraha for temple entry. He was nominated to the Bombay Legislative Council and became a professor at the Government Law College in 1928. In 1930, he was invited to attend the Indian Round Table Conference on Constitutional Reforms in London as a representative of the so-called depressed classes. His appointment marked a milestone in the socio-political struggle of the untouchables, for never before had they been consulted in framing the future of India. As independence grew near, Ambedkar ji turned his attention and energies to the constructive constitutional tasks for which he was well equipped. As chair of the drafting committee, he became one of the principal architects of independent India's constitution. His advice to the downtrodden classes, and especially to young men, is exemplary. He asks them to rely on their self, on their own efforts, to trust and exercise their own intelligence, and to seek refuge in reason. To him, nothing was more sacred than learning nature. Nature makes none a slave. No man is born a dullard. He recalled to students of the glorious traditions and untiring industry, high aims and high sense of public life. He related to his people the story from the Greek mythology of the goddess Demeter, who tried to develop Superman's power in a child by keeping it on fire every day. His message to his people is that they should strive endlessly, sacrifice the present pleasures for a great future, and should go through the ordeal of fire and sacrifice till they attain their goal. He said, you must have a firm belief in the sacredness of your goal. Noble is your aim, and sublime and glorious is your mission. Blessed are those who are awakened to their duty, to those among whom they are born. Glory to those who devote their time, talent, and their all to the annihilation of slavery. Glory to those who would keep their struggle for the liberation of the enslaved in spite of heavy odds, humiliations, storms and dangers, till the downtrodden secure their human rights. While for these and other reasons, Ambedkar ji unjustifiably remained controversial and grudgingly recognized figure for long, the pendulum swung to the other extreme from the 1980s onwards. Largely as a result of a better historical perspective offered by the passage of time, continuing atrocities against the Dalits even 60 years after independence, the growing political visibility of the OBCs and those sections of the scheduled caste who have acquired status and dignity because of, among other things, the reservation policy, is now almost deified in some circles. Across many states in India, his statues, portraits, posters bearing his image, and schools and parks are named after him have proliferated. His finely framed photos in immaculate Western attire are lovingly garlanded and placed in prominent places. In some parts of India, there is even a competition to build bigger and bigger statues of Ambedkarji. All this is perfectly understandable and within limits even proper. It is one way in which long suppressed communities express their pride in the achievements of someone who did so much for them at such a high personal cost. It is also a way of establishing collective solidarity among them and firming their resolve to fight for a better life. In any case, such worshipful adoration is not limited to Ambedkarji. Gandhiji had long been a recipient of it, and it is consistent with the traditional practice of honoring men and women of great qualities or vibhutis, remembering them daily and drawing inspiration and strength from them. I know today, he said, we are divided politically, socially, economically. We are a group of warring camps, and I may even go to the extent of confessing that I am probably one of the leaders of such a camp. With all our castes and creeds, I have not the slightest hesitation. Ambedkarji said, I have not the slightest hesitation that we shall one day, in some form, be a united people across the length and breadth of India. It is a great pleasure and privilege to remember today this great Indian scholar and statesman, leader and liberator, and the chief architect of the Constitution of India. Although the life of Dr. Ambedkar is chiefly remembered for liberating millions of people from their age-old bondage, it is no less a glorious fight for ushering in India a social and economic democracy. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, Ambedkarji's eternal search for knowledge, his incredible industry and unflinching aim with which he raised himself from the dust to toil, from the life of a leper to the position of a constitution maker, and his heroic struggle for raising the downtrodden to human dignity will constitute a golden chapter in the history of India and in the history of human freedom as well. Thank you very much.
की नोट एड्रेस देने के लिए हम लॉर्ड खालिद हमीद के प्रति अपना आभार व्यक्त करते हैं.
Thank you, sir.
Now I request Dr. Corny Lennox, who is a lecturer in the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, to say a few words.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, and High Commissioner. And thank you very much for the invitation to speak this evening. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to speak about Dr. Ambedkar's role in promoting human rights, because I believe he is one of the world's greatest defenders of human rights and philosophers of human rights. He was a true visionary rights contributing to the global evolution of this idea, to the legal enshrinement of rights, and he continues to inspire other human rights defenders to this day. So I'd like to start by sharing a few personal experiences of how I've seen Dr. Ambedkar inspire human rights defenders. Second, I want to highlight 3 progressive strands of his thinking on human rights and how this projected where the international human rights movement would go in the decades to follow. And third, I want to conclude by speaking about some achievements of the Dalit movement within this broader international human rights movement, especially at the United Nations. My first experience of Dr. Ambedkar's birthday celebrations came in April 2012 in Delhi. Some friends from the National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights invited me to the celebrations, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I arrived rather late on a rainy day, and to my surprise, I found this amazing street party happening. And although things were winding down, it was clear that in spite of the weather, everyone was enjoying the sharing of food and celebration. And as I walked along, this family approached me, and the father introduced himself, and he said he was an engineer, and he began to share with me why he felt this day of celebration was so important for himself personally, for Dalits, and for Indian society at large. And during that same stay in Delhi, I saw other examples of Dr. Ambedkar's influence and indeed his presence in continuing struggles for human rights in India. This ranged, for example, from a conference on democracy organized by the Dalit Student Federation at the JNU, which began with a short ceremony in honor of Dr. Ambedkar, also to a major march and rally for economic rights organized by the National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights, where the image, the spirit, and the words of Dr. Ambedkar are omnipresent. So why do I call Dr. Ambedkar a human rights defender? Some might see him narrowly, or more narrowly, as a defender of Dalit rights, but not of human rights more broadly. But I think an examination of his writings and his actions show very much that he was cosmopolitan in his philosophy of justice and in his legal and political work. And here I'd like to highlight 3 important progressive human rights ideas espoused by Dr. Ambedkar. The first is on the interdependence of human rights. A constant refrain in his writings is his call for, quote, liberty, equality, and fraternity. In contrast to the use of these principles in the French and American declarations, Dr. Ambedkar placed social and economic equality alongside political and civic equality. For example, he said, quote, on the 26th of January 1950, we are going to enter into a life of contradictions. In politics, we will have equality, and in social and economic life, we will have inequality. How long shall we continue to deny equality in our social and economic life? If we continue to deny it for long, we will do so only by putting our political democracy in peril. Poignant words, certainly, as India goes to the polls. So why was his idea progressive? Well, the global human rights movement was dominated for decades by this focus on civil and political rights issues, and only very latterly brought in economic and social rights more to the forefront of human rights advocacy. But Dr. Ambedkar was prescient in his recognition of the interdependence of civil and political rights and social and economic rights. Second, on women's human rights. Dr. Ambedkar said, quote, I measure the progress of a community by the degree of progress which women have achieved. He strived through efforts such as his proposed Hindu Code Bill to secure rights for women in India. But importantly, he was, of course, referring to all women, not just the progress of elite women, approaching gender equality as he was from the point of view of Dalit women. In contrast, we find the recognition of inequalities within the international women's human rights movement itself is still something that we are grappling with, and which came relatively late to the gender equality debate. Happily now we see that the voice of women in the Dalit movement is growing ever stronger, and so too the voice of Dalit women in the wider international human rights movement and also nationally. minority rights. Dr. Ambedkar was visionary in his understanding that democracy alone is not enough to guarantee the protection of the rights of minorities. He attempted to build into the Constitution several protections for different minority groups in India. Many of his efforts in this regard were not successful. It is still an area of human rights where there's a great deal of misunderstanding of how protecting minority groups from discrimination through various tools, including, for example, reservations, is essential to members of those groups fulfilling their individual human rights. Far from being a privilege, minority rights are a basic necessity for achieving equality in the face of discrimination. In the words of Dr. Ambedkar, quote, "Discrimination is another menace which must be guarded against if the fundamental rights are to be real rights." So to conclude, I want to turn to some contemporary achievements of the Dalit movement at the global level using international human rights mechanisms. Dr. Ambedkar himself was aware of the new United Nations being born, and there's evidence that he corresponded with leaders of the American civil rights movement about possibly petitioning jointly to the UN organization. The Dalit movement began using the UN human rights mechanisms more systematically towards the end of the 1990s. And I think the key achievement has been the international recognition of caste-based discrimination as a violation of international human rights and prohibited form of discrimination in international law. We've seen this elaborated further in the draft UN principles and guidelines for the effective elimination of discrimination based on work and descent. There's also been a great deal of use of the UN treaty bodies, which have a responsibility for examining how are states fulfilling their human rights obligations. And the UK, for example, has been brought before a treaty body to address its work combating caste-based discrimination. We also see extensive use of the Human Rights Council, where we have a peer review process where states evaluate other states' human rights records. And coincidentally, both the UK and India were reviewed at the same session a couple of years ago. Thanks to the skilled mobilization of advocates in the UK and India and working together internationally, both states were questioned on their efforts to combat caste-based discrimination. And more recently, and finally, the movement has focused on the post-2015 Millennium Development Goals agenda to see that caste-based discrimination is recognized as a barrier to achieving development in the new Sustainable Development Goals that governments are negotiating now. So why is this international work important? Well, there are limitations to what the UN can do practically on the ground, but the UN is there to uphold international human rights law, to recognize the violations of human rights where they occur, and to hold states to account for their voluntary commitments to national and international laws on human rights. And the UN, we have seen, has also offered a space for civil society to challenge their states on their human rights record. Dr. Ambedkar himself was responsible for drafting one of the strongest constitutions in the world from the point of view of human rights. And while he was actively engaged with national politics, he was also keenly aware of the limitations of democracy for those who are very marginalized and for whom the justice system has been weak. The UN was just being born when he was giving birth to the Indian Constitution. But given his cosmopolitan outlook, I think he too would have encouraged the movement to organize and agitate at different levels of political participation, and to find strength and solidarity across borders, both within and beyond the Dalit movement for human rights. Thank you.
अब मैं श्री योगराज अहिर साहब से अनुरोध करता हूँ कि वो दो शब्द कहें।
His Excellency, High Commissioner of India, Rajan Matheji, Deputy High Commissioner, Varinder Ji, Lord जी, मिनिस्टर ऑफ कोऑर्डिनेशन सिद्धू जी, संतोष जी, लेडीज एंड जेंटलमैन, अज असी उस महान शख्सियत भारत रत्न भीमराव अंबेडकर जी जिन्हां दी जयंती 123वीं अज असी हर साल की तरह इंडिया हाउस दे विच मना रहे हैं। सब तो पहला तो असी धन्नवादी हाँ इंडिया हाउस दे जिन्हां ने इस रस्म नूं हमेशा की तरह कायम रखा और भारत रत्न भीमराव अंबेडकर जी का जो जन्मदिन है असी पूरी पद्धर के उत्ते मना रहे हैं। डॉक्टर भीमराव अंबेडकर संसार दे विच कुछ शख्सियतां हुंदियां हन जिन्हां दा जन्म अपने देश लिए, अपने समाज लिए, अपनी कौम लिए होया करता है। डॉक्टर भीमराव अंबेडकर जी का जो जन्म है कि मैं समझता हाँ और तुसी सारे जानते हो कि उन्हों का जन्म ही मनुखता नूं उपर ले जाता। उन्हों का मकसद ही एक इहो जिहा सी क्योंकि इंडिया दे विच भारत दे विच जो सदियां तो कोल सी जात पात का ऊच नीच का जिन्होंने अज भी शूद्र कहा जाता, पहला तो उन्होंने जन्म उस जात विच होया। उन्होंने अपना जिहड़ा जीवन है उस दे विच वो कुछ देखा जो मनुखता दे बिल्कुल उल्ट सी। उन्होंने खुशकिस्मती ये कि वो पढ़ लिख के हिंदुस्तान दे विच, उस तो बाद अमेरिका दे विच, इंग्लैंड दे विच, जर्मनी दे विच जाके जो उन्होंने एजुकेशन लई लियाकत एजुकेशन एक इहो जिहा सोमा जिहड़ा कि इंसान नूं इंसान दिखाई देता। उन्हां दी जो एजुकेशन है उन्होंने मुताबिक क्योंकि उन्होंने बहुत उच्ची पढ़ाई की और थोड़े जिहा संसार में इंसान हैं जिन्होंने उस लैवल के उत्ते जाके ये शिक्षा प्राप्त की। उसकी बदौलत इंडिया जिस वेले आज़ाद होया कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बनना सी। कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन दे ड्राफ्टिंग कमेटी के चेयरपर्सन बने। जिहड़ा कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ऑफ इंडिया है उस दी अज जो बनतर देखिए तो इंसानियत नूं बराबरता दिंदी है, लेकिन उस दे विच जिहड़ियां कमियां अज भी हैं मैं समझदा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन च नहीं साडे अपने विच इंसानियत दे विच उन्होंने जो दौड़ दी है उस दे विच कोई कमी नहीं है। लेकिन अज भी समाज जो है अज भी सानू उत्थे बराबरता नहीं है, ये तुसीं सारे जानते हो। जिहड़ी कि 1923 दे विच क्योंकि उन्होंने अपने जीवन काल दे विच जो कुछ सीखिया 1923 दे विच जो उन्होंने गल की है वो अज भी साडे हिंदुस्तान दे विच भारत दे विच उस दे उत्ते अमल हो रहा कि प्रॉब्लम ऑफ रूपी। इकनॉमिक्स दे विच जिस वेले गल आती है तो हिंदुस्तान नूं भारत नूं जे उहदी ग्रोथ वाल नज़र मारीए तो उन्होंने 1923 दे विच वो गल कहती सी जिहड़ी अज असीं ढूंढदे हां। कि जब तक किसी मुल्क की इकोनमी सही नहीं तो उदों तक उस मुल्क का बहुता कुछ नहीं हो सकता। 1923 में जी उन्होंने गल कही इकोनमी की वो अज भी साडे ते ढुकदी है। सो बहुत सारिया गल्लां हन जिहड़ियां कि साडे भारत लई अज दे युग दे विच सानू बनदियां हन कि असीं उस दे उत्ते चलीए। उन्हां दा जिहड़ा मकसद सी वो इक्को ही सी, पहला तो एजुकेशन लो, फिर संघर्ष करो तो इकट्ठे हो। इकट्ठे होवांगे तदे ही जे साडे विच थोड़ी जी एजुकेशन होएगी। संघर्ष असीं तदे कहाँ करांगे जे असीं इकट्ठे होवांगे ते देश नूं, मुल्क नूं, कौम नूं तदे ही असीं दे सकते हैं जे असीं एकमुठ होके उन्हां दे जिहड़ी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनली जो गल है उस दे उत्ते अमल करिए। सो अज मैं सारी हुई समाज नूं उन्हां दे इस बर्थडे दे उत्ते सब नूं लख लख वधाई दिना और खास तौर पर इंडिया हाउस का बहुत धन्नवादी हाँ जिन्होंने सानू इस काबिल समझा कि असीं इत्थे आके 2 लफ्ज़ बोलीए, क्योंकि मैं तो पढ़िया लिखा भी नहीं पर फिर भी अपने हिसाब के नाल जो मैनू समझ है उसके मुताबिक मैं जो गल की है, मेरा ख्याल है कि तुसीं उसनूं जरूर सुनिया है। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद बाबा साहब डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर।
सुश्री गिरा अशोक चक्रवर्ती से अनुरोध करता हूँ कि वो कविता पाठ करें बाबा साहब के सम्मान में।
Jai Hind, Jai Bharat. Your Excellencies, the worshipful mayors, Lord Hamid, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters. As the Public Affairs Secretary of the FEBO and Buddhist Organization UK and also a high school teacher, I'm greatly honored to express my deep sense of gratitude to the High Commissioner and his entire team's hard work for organizing such a great event every 14th of April. Today is the day of joy and happiness. Our beloved Baba Sahib taught us the true meaning of humanity, equality and liberty. He gave the gem of democracy to us. We are determined to rededicate ourselves to Baba Sahib's mission. Great men have sprung from palaces as well as from cottages. They have sprung from the homes of shoemakers, tailors, butchers, bricklayers, and blacksmiths. But Baba Sahib had the unique distinction of springing from the dust. 123 years ago, Baba Sahib was born in Mahoo. Mahoo means military headquarters of warriors. Throughout his lifetime, he remained a warrior. The story of the life of Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar was the struggle of a champion for human rights. Baba Sahib Ambedkar was a fighter for the dignity of man and the savior of a suppressed people. No man in India, or perhaps in any country, could equal Ambedkar in his career, which was exciting, varied, and wonderful. Baba Sahib's name, therefore, will be imperishably linked with the history of India. Most of his ideals have been incorporated into the constitution. He rebelled against Manu and dethroned him from his high pedestal. This was a victory unequaled in the history of his ancient land. Thus, Baba Sahib achieved what was above the ambition and attainment, and beyond the dream of his countrymen. He belongs to the men of first
eminence of his age. He belongs to the line of those who have been saviors of the suppressed and oppressed. He shaped the life of millions of people. He made his mark on the times. He wrote his name on the future of India and in the history of human freedom. No doubt, Baba Saheb's life provides an example and an inspiration to the downtrodden masses of humanity that no bar of class, no bar of caste, no bar of privilege, no bar of riches can prevent the full attainment and growth of an individual who is determined to build his personality on patient labor, burning sincerity, supreme courage, and selfless sacrifice. Baba Saheb made great efforts to eradicate the social evils like untouchability and deep-rooted caste prejudices. He also suggested strategies for emancipation from unjust oppression, and he found emancipation in Buddhist values, which promotes education, equality, self-respect, and self-reliance. Untouchability was abolished under the Constitution of Free Bharat. Baba Saheb's dream realized and the ambition materialized. The bondage ended. He said it, he did it. Baba Saheb's values and principles have been lighting our path towards wisdom and learning for the past many, many years, and he will keep guiding us for the many years to come. As I spoke about the legacy of Baba Saheb Ambedkar, what he represented and how I personally became inspired by him, I recommend that schools should teach more about Baba Saheb Ambedkar to ensure the legacy of such an amazing mind is not forgotten. Today, the unique life of Bodhisattva Baba Saheb has become a new source of learning and new source of inspiration for us. From it has emerged a new path, new light, and the lamp that will be burning in its temple, in the land of temples, will be seen from all sides of nations and from distant corners of the world. A new academy of knowledge, a new inspiration for poetry, a new place of pilgrimage, and new opportunity for literature has sprung up. With these words, I pay my humble tribute to my master and savior, Dr. Bodhisattva Baba Saheb Ambedkar. Jai Bhim, Jai Bharat. जाने से पहले मैं एक दो पंक्तियां हिंदी में भी कहना चाहूंगी। आओ मिलकर बनाए एक ऐसा कारवां, आओ मिलकर बनाए हम ऐसा कारवां जो कलम की ताकत से तोपों और तलवारों के भी मुंह मोड़ दे, जो कलम की ताकत से तोपों और तलवारों के भी मुंह मोड़ दे। टूट रहा जो इंसान नफरत और असमानता के कारण, टूट रहा जो इंसान नफरत और असमानता के कारण, उसे समानता आपसी प्रेम, उसे समानता और आपसी प्रेम और सद्भावना से जोड़ दे, सद्भावना से जोड़ दे। मानव धर्म की लगाकर बाबा साहब की आस, कभी न भूलेंगे हम, कभी न भूलेंगे हम, बुद्ध फूले शाहू महाराज, बुद्ध फूले शाहू महाराज। महामानव तुमको अनंत विचारों की वंदना, महामानव तुमको अनंत विचारों की वंदना। जय बुद्ध, जय भीम, जय भारत।
Honorable High Commissioner and Deputy High Commissioner, distinguished guests, and the Indian community, Jabi. As an African American, I bring you greetings from my people. Those of my people who know of your struggle will quickly recognize the similarities between the struggle of Dalits and the struggles of African Americans. For while we engage in this struggle against suppression and subordination in different countries with different cultures, there is a certain commonality about oppression and subordination that we both experience. I have long believed that we, as African Americans, learn very much from your struggle, as I believe that you too can learn from ours, and that in that way together we are stronger. It is truly, truly an honor for me to be here today to celebrate Dr. Ambedkar's birthday with you today. This will be my chance to celebrate Dr. Ambedkar with the third different Indian community. I had an opportunity to speak at the 100th anniversary of Dr. Ambedkar coming to Columbia. I have been to India several times and celebrated Dr. Ambedkar over there. As an African American law professor of 28 years, my primary focus has been on the struggles of my people in the United States. But it is because of our struggles against racism and oppression in the United States that I became very, very interested in the struggles of Dalits in India. Indeed, I have now been to India on 5 different occasions, the last 4 of which were solely for the purposes of interacting with Dalit intellectuals and Dalit activists. My first time there was in 1996, 1997, where I had the good fortune to be at the National Law School of Bangalore with an office next to that of Professor Jaffet, the only professor of Dalit descent at that very prestigious law school in India. He made sure I was very well aware of the struggles that the Dalit community goes through. In 2003, he invited me back to Bangalore as part of the Bangalore Initiative, a meeting of Dalit intellectuals throughout all of India to discuss the impact of globalization on the Dalit community. And it was there I had the opportunity to meet such fine people as Dr. Suresh Mani, Dr. Chandraban Prasad. I came back in 2006 and 2010, and then in 2012 I led a group of 13 American academics to India, where it was, as near as I can tell, the first time that a significant group of African American intellectuals have traveled to India for the sole purpose of interacting with Dalit intellectuals in Bombay or Mumbai, in Delhi, and we also visited a Dalit scavenger village in Mohammadabad. Our last meeting in that group was actually with Rahul Gandhi, where we had an hour-and-a-half meeting with him and had an opportunity to talk to him about our impressions of the struggles of Dalits in India. Thus, I've spent quite a bit of time with your struggles and quite a bit of time reading the workings and writing about the workings of Dr. Ambedkar. And when I think of Dr. Ambedkar, I think of him in terms of how I would think of our great African American intellectuals. I think in terms of a historian, his work would rate as a historian as good as that of John Hope Franklin, which is our best historian. In terms of religion, his version of Buddhism would be similar to the version of Islam created by Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad. And in that way, I would see him as comparable with those. But he was also your major political leader. And in that sense, he would be analogous to our Barack Obama, who was certainly our greatest political leader. As an organizer of mass movements, I would rate him right up there with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In terms of the impact that he has had. And in terms of a social philosopher, I would rate him up there with our W.E.B. Du Bois. So when I think of Dr. Ambedkar and when I talk with my African American friends and try to describe who he is, I talk to them and say, well, he's John Hope Franklin, Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, Barack Obama, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., W. As a law professor, and law professors in the United States, I think, have a higher status than they do here in the United Kingdom, because ultimately our legal system has final authority on even the legislation passed by Congress. So effectively, nothing becomes law in the United States unless the lawyers say it is law. And as a law professor, then my job is to teach the people who will then organize and lead American society. And in that, when one studies law, one really is talking about how to structure society. So as part of that, it's incumbent upon me to read all the great philosophers, all the great religious thinkers, to think about how best to organize our society. And I have done that. And when I think of Dr. Ambedkar, and I think of the great philosophers of all time, I think of John Locke, Thomas Hobbes here in the United Kingdom, Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin, Plato, Aristotle, Nietzsche, Hegel, Spinoza, Rousseau, Lord Buddha, Shankara, and Marx. And I would ultimately conclude that his writings and his thinking would rank him as the best philosopher of all time. You should truly, truly be proud of him. And in closing, I want to say one thing. It was always clear in the United States that if you could eliminate the oppression that black people in America had suffered, it would be the greatest social accomplishment of the United States. And 150 years out of slavery, much of the discrimination against us has been lifted, though not all of it. There is still work to be done. But when I think of humanity as a group, and why I am drawn to the struggle of Dalits in India, is that if we as humanity could truly bring liberty, equality, and fraternity to Dalits, that would be the greatest social accomplishment of humankind.
कोई कविता सुनाने जा रहे हैं बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर के सामने।
Honorable and respectable High Commissioner of India, distinguished all members and mayors and deputy mayors, I'm going to sing a song in Punjabi. I'm sorry, the song only in Punjabi. But can I sing without Tranam? सेवा देश ते कौम दी बड़ी औखी ओ गल्लां करनियां ढेर सकलियां ने जिन्हां देश सेवा विच पैर पाए उन्हां लख मुसीबतां झल्लियां ने मनुवादी फिलासफी आई जद दी ओ बेड़ा देश दा इसने गर्क कीता बंदर बंड की थी मजहबी झगड़ियां ने देश देख लो स्वर्ग तो नरक कीता कौमी घातकां नूं मिलण उच्च दर्जे देश सेवकां नूं दन फांसियां दा जातिवाद ते ईरखा पढ़न जिथे रब रखा यारो उस देश वासियां दा भारत देश नूं सोने दी चिड़ी कहंदे ओ लुटी जांदे अमरीका ते रूस लोको कामे दे जिस्म अंदर जावर ताड़ भी रहे ने चूस लोको सानू इस आजादी दे मान जादा ओ दिता कड मंगियाई ने जूस लोको भ्रष्टाचारां नू जे न बागे नथ पाई ओ रहना कुलियां उते ना फूस लोको आया ना अंबेडकर दे जग ते हुंदा अज तेरे चमचे सितारे ना हुंदे दल दल दे विच चिक्कड़ विच तू फसिया सी रहना जे भीमा दे राज दलारे ना हुंदे मल्ली बैठे हीर आजादी नू खेड़े तेरे लिए तख्त हजारे ना हुंदे तू विद्या तो बांझे ते सखने सी रहना विद्या दे खोले जे भंडारे ना हुंदे मंदार दे विच बेड़ी सी गोते पे खांदी तेरे लिए पार किनारे ना हुंदे दिल्ली दे तख्ते ते औरत ना बहंदी दिल्ली दे तख्ते ते औरत ना बहंदी संविधान दे पन्ने जे शंगारे ना हुंदे कुलियां दे चौकियां तू करदा गुजारा कुलियां दे चौकियां तू करदा गुजारा चवारे दा की तेरे तारे ना हुंदे इंग्लैंड विच जाके जे शेर ना गरजदा जे कीते भाषण करारे ना हुंदे लोकां दियां बुतियां बगारां सी पल्ले खुशहाली दे दिन गुजारे ना हुंदे वोट दा हक तैनू किसने सी ला के देना कीते संघर्ष भारे ना हुंदे एयर कंडीशन ये कारां ना हुंदियां मिनिस्टर दी गल करदे एयर कंडीशनर ये कारां ना हुंदियां तंगे उत्ते खांदे हुलारे ना हुंदे बोलन ते तेरे ऐसी पाबंदी मनुवादी जे फड़ के सुधारे ना हुंदे सटे तां स्टेजां ते अज भी ये रौनक ना हुंदी पागां दे विच तेरी पागां दे विच तेरे हुंदी ना कोठी दे उत्ते चवारे ना हुंदे एक मरला भूमि तू लै नहीं सकदा पंजाब दी गल एक भूमि तू मरला लै नहीं सकदा एकड़ां दे खेत खिलारे ना हुंदे भीम जी दी सिक्ख्या नूं जे पल्ले बंदा थां थां ते तेरे बटवारे ना हुंदे दिल्ली दे तख्ते ते तू राज करदा दिल्ली दे तख्ते ते तू राज करदा फुट ने जे पैर पसारे ना हुंदे ये तख्त बदलो ये ताज बदलो बागे दे अज भी ये नाल ना हुंदे सो अगला तरंद विच गीत है विधान दे विच जिस तरह मेरा साथी कह गया रविदासा प्रधान जी विधान दे विच कोई नुक्स नहीं है नीयत उन्हां लीडरां दी नीयत साफ नहीं ईमानदारी नाल नहीं कीता गया संविधान नूं लागू नहीं ते हिंदुस्तान अज किसे होर दशा दे विच हुंदा तेरे कीते उपकारां दा बाबा सिंह समुद्र करके तेरे कीते उपकारां दा ऐसान बदलना चाहुंदे ने ओए टोला बेईमानां दा संविधान बदलना चाहुंदे ने ए टोला बेईमानां दा संविधान बदलना चाहुंदे ने तेरी मेहर परी कुर्बानी नूं ए जनता भुल के रह गई है नैतिकता दिलों गुआ बैठे सच वाली बेड़ी बह गई है ए दुखियां ते मजलूमां दा बई दुखियां ते मजलूमां दा भगवान बदलना चाहुंदे ने ए टोला बेईमानां दा ए टोला बेईमानां दा संविधान बदलना चाहुंदे ने ओ सदियां तो दबे कुचड़ियां दी तू जीवन जोत जगाई सी ता किले तू पूंजी पतियां दे दुखी खलक सीने लाई सी सदियां तो दबे कुचड़ियां दी तू जीवन जोत जगाई सी ता किले तू पूंजी पतियां दे दुखी खलक सीने लाई सी तेरे हक सच बाले नारे दा तेरे हक सच बाले नारे दा वरदान बदलना चाहुंदे ने ए टोला बेईमानां दा ए टोला बेईमानां दा संविधान बदलना चाहते ने लख लानत दिलतां दे लीडरां नूं ओ जिन्हां अपना आप पछाणिया नहीं जो भीमराव जी कह गए सन इन्हां मूलों उस नूं जाणिया नहीं लख लानत दिलतां दे लीडरां नूं जिन्हां अपना आप पछाणिया नहीं जो भीमराव जी कह गए सन इन्हां मूलों उस नूं जाणिया नहीं ए भुखे लीडर चौधर दे ए भुखे लीडर चौधर दे मुल अपना पुआउणा चाहुंदे ने ए टोला बेईमानां दा ए टोला बेईमानां दा संविधान बदलना चाहुंदे ने जिस खातर भीम जी आए सन बागे ओ बणिया संसार नहीं लीडर साडे विक जांदे ने तेरे करतावां दा सत्कार नहीं जिस खातर भीम जी आए सन ओ बागे ओ बणिया संसार नहीं लीडर साडे विक जांदे ने तेरे कमां दा सत्कार नहीं अज हाकम भ्रष्टाचारी जो अज हाकम भ्रष्टाचारी जो मनु बान बदलना चाहते ने ए टोला बेईमानां दा ए टोला बेईमानां दा संविधान बदलना चाहते ने लास्ट फिगरा जी उठो भारत मां दे शेरो वे उठो भारत मां दे शेरो वे कुछ मोदी बारे सोचो भई मेरा भारत देश आबाद रहे मनु बाती फट्टी पहुंचो भई उठो भारत मां दे शेरो वे कुछ मोदी बारे सोचो भई मेरा भारत देश आबाद रहे मनु बाती फट्टी पहुंचो भई संघर्ष दे राह पे भागे दे संघर्ष दे राह पे भागे दे अरमान बदलना चाहते ने ए टोला बेईमानां दा ए टोला बेईमानां दा संविधान बदलना चाहते ने
और आखिर में मैं हेबो की प्रेसिडेंट सुश्री संतोष दास जी से अनुरोध करता हूँ कि वो समाप्त करें।
Lord Hamid, worshipful mayors, ladies and gentlemen, there can be no doubt that Dr. Ambedkar Babasaheb is very important and larger-than-life man for all of us. And tonight we've heard a succession of thought-provoking speakers from the political, academic, religious, and human rights spheres. They've all shone light on how Babasaheb inspired and continues to inspire critical engagement with human rights and equality laws on both national and international levels. To my mind, there is no doubt that Dr. Ambedkar had some of the strongest academic credentials of any Indian of his time. He achieved this by overcoming the obstacles, oppression, and social exclusion that people of his caste faced on a daily basis. So when Indians recently voted Dr. Ambedkar the greatest Indian since 1947, it came as no surprise. Babasaheb left a huge body of writings spanning 40 years and covering a variety of subjects, amongst them history, economics, anthropology, politics, philosophy, and law. And these writings are proof positive of his prowess, his intellectual rigour, and his clarity of thought. He got to the root of the problems that his community and the new nation were facing. In a culture that is largely oral, leaving so much written work, speeches, journals, books, are his gift not only to the subsequent generations of Indians, but to anyone, anywhere, with an interest in human rights, the theory and practice of equal treatment, and civil rights movements. And Professor Brown here today and Dr. Corinne Lennox are perfect examples of this. And I'm sure everybody remembers how they first became aware of Baba Sahib. And my introduction came thanks to my late father, Mr. Hansraj Siddiq, who lived all his life in Hounslow. Dad had many of his books, and he took us to his annual celebrations to mark Baba Sahib's birthday. But it was not until the age of 12, after reading The Annihilation of Caste, that I really understood the genius of the man. And later I learned that he'd overseen the drafting of the Constitution that gave the best chance of equality of treatment and opportunity to people in India. And it was plain that he was also a great civil rights movement leader, worthy to be spoken of in the same breath as Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela that we learned about in school. Baba Sahib was also a champion of gender equality, and Dr. Lennox referred to that. In spite of considerable resistance, he did all he could to tackle the injustices that women face in India in what was and sadly remains a very patriarchal society. Only last week, I came across a BBC radio interview that Baba Sahib gave in 1955. And it was a lovely feeling to hear him speak for about 20 minutes in a very relaxed and reflective manner. I felt as if I was in the same room as him, and I think if you have an opportunity to listen to it, then please do, because his voice is absolutely amazing. In it, he summed up eloquently how he saw equality of treatment and opportunity, and I repeat his words. He said, "There are two things about the scheduled caste. We want untouchability to be abolished, but we also want that we must be given equal opportunity so that we may rise to the level of other classes. Mere washing off of untouchability is of no consequence. We've been carrying on with untouchability for the last 2,000 years. Nobody has bothered about it." Under India's constitution, once properly implemented, Baba Sahib gave us a complete recipe for delivering equality of treatment and opportunity, both under the law and through the affirmative actions within it. For his country, Dr. Ambedkar wanted a free India from colonialism, but he also wanted a well-thought-through exit, or a staged exit, that benefited all Indians. And it would have been in everybody's interest to have this. And in the same BBC interview, he said, if Swaraj had come in slow degrees in India, it would have profited the people better. For each community or each group which is suffering from many of these disabilities would have been able to consolidate itself at a stage of the transfer of power from the British. Now in Britain, there are many, whether it's them or their families before them, who have faced caste-based discrimination that has sadly been imported here. Inspired by Baba Sahib's fight for justice and equality, we have said, enough is enough. We believe if we have laws to protect us from other types of discrimination, why not a law against caste-based discrimination? And it is good that the UK government has finally agreed to implement the law to outlaw caste-based discrimination, hopefully by summer of 2015, according to their timetable. But annoyingly, the timetable for implementation of the law agreed by Parliament in April 2013 is causing unnecessary delay. I would like to end with a few actions that we must really take forward. Baba Sahib had links with the London School of Economics and Gray's Inn, London. Over the coming years, the Federation of Ambedkarites and Buddhist UK, working with other organisations leading on human rights and equality issues, will begin to progress 3 initiatives. The first is to establish a Dr. Ambedkar scholarship at the LSE. The second is to install a plaque for Dr. Ambedkar at Gray's Inn. And the third is to have his contribution to civil rights and equality of treatment, human rights, and the contributions that he made to empower women taught in the UK curriculum alongside other leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela. Now I look forward to the people here today and the distinguished guests and others engaging with these initiatives, guiding us, supporting us in their achievement over the years. And last, I would like to end by thanking my colleagues at FABO, the Ravidasya and the Valmiki communities and other organisations around the country who celebrate Dr. Ambedkar's life and work annually, and the High Commissioner of India here who celebrates the birth anniversary every year. They, I believe, keep the sunshine that is Dr. Ambedkar shining on us. Thank you.
अब मैं फर्स्ट सेक्रेटरी कोऑर्डिनेशन से अनुरोध करता हूं कि उस सभा का धन्यवाद ज्ञापन करें।
Very good evening and greetings on the 123rd anniversary of Dr. Ambedkar. Let me begin with thanking the Honorable High Commissioner, the Deputy High Commissioner and Minister Coordination for guiding us in preparing this function tonight, this evening. Thank you, Lord Hamid, for an impressive keynote address. We also thank Dr. Corinne Lennox, Ms. Santosh Das, the President of FABO, Mr. Joe Rajahir, the President of Sri Guru Ravidas Sabha, Professor Kevin Brown of Indiana University, for their perspectives and impressions of the great leader. I would also like to thank the Mayor of Enfield, the Mayor of Barking and Dagenham, the Deputy Mayor of Ealing, Deputy Mayor of Southwark for their kind presence this evening. I would also like to thank Mr. Gautam Chakravarti, who is, has been extending unstinting cooperation to the High Commission in making this program successful. He works behind the scenes in FABO and has done a great deal of work. Ms. Gira Ashok Chakravarti for reciting the nice poem and good words. Mr. Sucha Singh, who has come all the way from Glasgow, for his inspiring and very encouraging song which he sung so melodiously and lively. And most importantly, I'd like to thank all of you who took time off on this working day, the first day of the week, for being a part of this celebration. Thank you very much, all of you. And now, before I end, I'd like to invite all of you to have a very simple meal in Gandhi Hall on the first floor. Thank you very much.
ਦੇ ਸੂਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਸਿਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਝੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਕੌਮ ਦੇ ਸੂਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਸਿਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਝੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਜੋ ਬਾਬਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਚਲਾਏ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਕੌਮ ਦੇ ਸੂਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਸਿਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਝੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਜੋ ਬਾਬਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਚਲਾਏ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕਦੇ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਨਾਲ ਪਹਾੜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੱਥਾ ਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਪੰਨਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਉਹੀ ਲਿਖਵਾਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ। ਨਾਲ ਪਹਾੜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੱਥਾ ਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਪੰਨਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਉਹੀ ਲਿਖਵਾਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ। ਅੱਗ ਦੇ ਜੋ ਅੰਗਿਆਰੇ, ਅੱਗ ਦੇ ਜੋ ਅੰਗਿਆਰੇ ਬੁੱਕਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਬਾਬਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਚਲਾਏ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਹੁਣ ਕੌਮ ਦੇ ਸੂਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਸਿਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਝੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਜੋ ਬਾਬਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਚਲਾਏ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕਦੇ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਭਾਵਨਾ ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਕੱਢ ਦਿਓ, ਰਲ ਕਰੂ ਬਗਾਵਤ ਅਣਖੀ ਝੰਡੇ ਗੱਡ ਦਿਓ। ਹੁਣ ਹੀਣ ਭਾਵਨਾ ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਕੱਢ ਦਿਓ, ਰਲ ਕਰੂ ਬਗਾਵਤ ਅਣਖੀ ਝੰਡੇ ਗੱਡ ਦਿਓ। ਜੋ ਖਿੱਚੇ ਬਿਨ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨੇ, ਖਿੱਚੇ ਬਿਨ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨੇ ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਉਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਚਲਾਏ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਹੁਣ ਕੌਮ ਦੇ ਸੂਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਸਿਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਝੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਜੋ ਬਾਬਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਚਲਾਏ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕਦੇ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਕੌਮ ਦੀ ਖਾਤਰ ਬਣਦਾ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਏ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੱਖਣਾ ਦੁੱਖ ਦਰਦ ਤਾਂ ਆਉਣਾ ਏ। ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਕੌਮ ਦੀ ਖਾਤਰ ਬਣਦਾ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਏ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੱਖਣਾ ਦੁੱਖ ਦਰਦ ਤੇ ਆਉਣਾ ਏ। ਭਾਵੇਂ ਪੈਰੀ ਪੈ ਜਾਣ ਛਾਲੇ, ਪੈਰੀ ਪੈ ਜਾਣ ਛਾਲੇ, ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਦੁੱਖਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਚਲਾਏ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਹੁਣ ਕੌਮ ਦੇ ਸੂਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਸਿਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਝੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਜੋ ਬਾਬਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਚਲਾਏ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕਦੇ ਇਹ ਕਾਫਲੇ ਰੁਕਣੇ ਨਹੀਂ। ਲੱਖ ਬਣਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀਮਾ ਸਿਰ ਝੁਕਦਾ ਤੇਰੇ ਅੱਗੇ। ਲੱਖ ਬਣਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀਮਾ ਸਿਰ ਝੁਕਦਾ ਤੇਰੇ ਅੱਗੇ। ਤੇਰੀ ਕਲਮ ਤੋਂ ਲੋ ਲੈ ਕੇ